The sun hung low over the wide, dusty plains of the west, casting long golden shadows across the rugged landscape. The wind whispered through the dry grass, carrying with it the scent of sagebrush and the distant tang of the mountains. On this lonely stretch of desert, life was never easy. The heat of the day could be unbearable, and the nights brought a sharp cold that settled into the bones. It was a land where only the strong and the clever could survive, and yet, even here the small and vulnerable could sometimes find hope. A young Apache girl wandered alone through this harsh wilderness. Her small feet left delicate prints in the dusty ground as she moved cautiously from one rocky outcrop to another, eyes wide and watchful. Her dark hair, tangled and dusty from days in the sun, fell across her face, but it could not hide the fear that shadowed her features. She had been separated from her family, though she could not remember exactly how it had happened. One moment they had been together, sharing food and warmth, and the next, she had been alone with nothing but the endless desert surrounding her. She had learned quickly that the world outside the safety of her family was unforgiving. Water was scarce, and food was even scarcer. Small lizards and birds were sometimes her only companions, and she had learned to catch what she could, foraging for roots and berries where she could find them. Every rustle in the brush made her heart race. Every distant coyote howl reminded her that danger was never far away. She had grown used to hiding, crouching behind rocks or under the shadow of the sparse trees that dotted the land, waiting for the world to pass her by. Despite her fear, there was a spark in her eyes, a determination not to give up, not to let the loneliness overwhelm her. She whispered to herself in the quiet moments, stories of her family, of laughter and warmth, imagining that she was not truly alone. Yet as night fell and the stars blinked coldly in the clear sky, a deep aching fear settled in her chest. She shivered under the blanket of darkness, feeling the crushing weight of solitude. It was then that the thought struck her, plain and painful. She didn't want to be alone anymore. Miles away, a rancher rode along the edge of his land. He was a tall man, weathered by years in the sun and wind, with a face lined by both hard work and quiet kindness. He knew this land better than anyone, every ridge and valley, every hiding place where wild animals might lurk. He had learned to respect the power of nature and the challenges it presented, and he had learned to act with caution when something unusual appeared on his land. That day, as he guided his horse along a narrow trail, he noticed movement in the distance. Squinting against the bright afternoon light, he saw a small figure weaving through the rocks. At first, he thought it might be one of the wild children from the nearby town, but as he got closer, he realized it was a young girl, alone and clearly lost. Something about her caught his attention. Not just her small, fragile frame, but the unmistakable fear in her movements, the way she looked around as if the very air could harm her. He slowed his horse, unsure what to do. Many in the West would have turned away, fearing trouble or troublemakers. But there was something in the way she looked at him that stirred his heart. The girl froze when she saw him, instinctively crouching behind a boulder as if she could disappear into the rock itself. Her eyes were wide, shimmering with a mixture of fear and hope. She did not speak at first, simply watching him with caution. The rancher dismounted slowly, keeping his hands visible, making no sudden moves. He understood what it meant to approach someone afraid, especially someone so small and vulnerable. Finally, the girl's voice broke the silence, soft and trembling, yet carrying a strange courage. "I don't want to be alone," she said, almost a whisper, almost a plea. The words seemed to hang in the air, fragile but full of meaning. The rancher's heart tightened. In all his years on this land, he had never met anyone so alone, so openly vulnerable, and so brave at the same time. He knelt down a little, careful not to appear threatening, and spoke gently. "It's all right," he said. "You're safe. You don't have to be alone anymore." His voice was calm, steady, the kind of voice that promised protection without demanding trust immediately. The girl hesitated, uncertain if she could believe him. The world had taught her to be cautious, to expect danger even from those who seemed kind. But something in his eyes told her that he meant what he said. With careful steps, she emerged from behind the boulder, every movement slow and deliberate. She did not reach out or smile. She only allowed herself to be seen. The rancher offered her a piece of bread from his saddlebag, and she took it with trembling hands. The simple act of sharing food became a silent bridge between their worlds, a promise of safety, however fragile. He led her back toward the ranch, speaking softly along the way, pointing out simple things about the land, small tips for staying safe. She listened with wide eyes, absorbing every word, every gesture. The ranch was not far, but it was a place unlike anything she had ever known. There were buildings with walls that reached up to the sky, horses that snorted and stamped in the corral, and other signs of human life that made her both nervous and fascinated. When they reached the main house, the rancher paused at the door. He looked down at her, waiting for her decision. She took a deep breath, a small but determined movement, and nodded. She was ready, at least for now, to accept help, to step into a world that was so different from the wild she had known. The rancher opened the door and led her inside, the cool shade of the house offering relief from the harsh sun outside. Inside, the smells of cooked food and leather greeted her, strange yet comforting. The rancher introduced her to the small routines of the household, showing her a place to rest and simple rules to follow. He was careful not to overwhelm her, knowing that trust could not be rushed. She listened quietly, absorbing the unfamiliar sounds and smells, the warmth that seemed to radiate from every corner of the room. That evening, as the sky turned deep purple and the first stars began to appear, the girl sat quietly by the hearth, her hands clasped around a small piece of bread. The rancher watched her from a distance, giving her space but remaining close enough that she could see he was near. She thought of her family, of the loneliness that had pressed against her like a heavy stone. But now, for the first time in many days, she felt a small flicker of hope. She was not completely alone anymore. Outside, the wind continued to whisper across the plains, carrying with it the distant cries of coyotes and the faint scent of wildflowers. Inside, the quiet was filled with the promise of safety, the beginning of a bond that neither time nor hardship could easily break. The girl knew the road ahead would not be easy. Life on the ranch, survival in the West, and the challenges of trust would test her every day. Yet for the first time, she also knew that she did not have to face it alone. The rancher, too, felt a shift within himself. He had lived a long life on the frontier, seen hardships, and faced countless dangers. But in that moment, he realized that helping someone in need, especially someone as small and frightened as this girl, was more than an act of kindness. It was a chance to make a difference, to protect life where it was most vulnerable. The fire crackled in the hearth. The shadows danced along the walls, and the vast, empty land outside seemed a little less lonely, a little less harsh. The girl leaned back against a soft blanket, her eyes heavy with exhaustion, but her heart lighter than it had been in weeks. She did not speak much, but her presence filled the room with a quiet courage. The rancher quietly tended to his own chores, careful not to disturb her, yet feeling a deep connection that words could not express. In the silence of that first night, a fragile trust was born, a beginning that promised warmth, safety, and perhaps in time belonging. And so, under the wide expanse of stars, in the harsh but beautiful land of the West, the girl who had once feared being alone found herself at the threshold of a new life, one where courage, kindness, and hope would slowly begin to heal the loneliness that had weighed so heavily on her young heart. The next morning, the Apache girl woke to the soft light of dawn spilling through the small windows of the ranch house. The smell of fresh bread and cooked porridge filled the air, welcoming her to a world so different from the dusty, empty plains she had wandered. She sat quietly at the wooden table, her small hands wrapped around a warm mug, savoring the simple comfort of food and warmth. The rancher moved about the kitchen with practiced ease, tending to chores, and he glanced at her occasionally with a gentle smile. He understood that trust was not earned quickly, and he was patient, giving her the time she needed to feel safe in this new place. As the days passed, she began to learn the rhythms of life on the ranch. She followed the rancher to the corrals, watching how he tended to the horses with care and skill. She learned how to feed them, brush their coats, and guide them gently into the stables. At first she was timid, afraid she might make a mistake or upset the animals, but the rancher's calm guidance gave her confidence. He encouraged her gently, saying, "Take your time. There's no rush. Every day you'll learn something new." Slowly, she began to find joy in these simple tasks, discovering a sense of purpose that had been missing during her lonely days in the desert. The rancher also taught her about the land itself, showing her which plants were safe to eat, how to find water, and how to recognize signs of approaching storms or wild animals. She listened intently, absorbing every word, every gesture as though her life depended on it because in many ways it did. The desert had been harsh, unforgiving, and full of hidden dangers, and she knew that survival required knowledge, patience, and courage. Each new skill she learned made her feel stronger, more capable, and slowly, the fear that had clung to her like a shadow began to lift. Despite the growing routine, there were moments when the weight of her loneliness returned. She would sit quietly by the fence, staring at the distant horizon, thinking of her family, wondering if they were safe, and wishing she could see them again. The rancher noticed these moments and would approach her gently, never prying but offering comfort when she needed it. Sometimes he would share stories of his own past, tales of hardship and survival, of times when he too had felt alone. She listened, fascinated by the life he had led, and realized that loneliness was not something she faced alone. It was something that even adults could understand, and together they could bear it. Neighbors in the nearby town began to notice the girl at the ranch. Some were curious, some suspicious. In a world that was often divided by fear and misunderstanding, people did not always trust what they did not understand. Yet the girl's quiet courage and willingness to help gradually won them over. She assisted in small chores, fetching water, helping with minor repairs, or simply offering a kind word. Each act, no matter how small, built bridges between her and the community, slowly transforming suspicion into respect. She discovered that even in a world full of challenges, kindness and determination could open doors that fear had closed. Storms came and went, as they always did in the West, testing the resilience of both the land and those who lived on it. Heavy rains turned dry trails into muddy torrents, and fierce winds bent the trees to their will. Through it all, the girl learned to endure, finding shelter with the rancher, helping secure the animals, and gaining confidence in her ability to face hardship. Each storm was a lesson, teaching her that fear could be faced and managed, and that courage was not the absence of fear, but the willingness to act despite it. The rancher watched her grow with pride, understanding that she was becoming strong in ways that went far beyond physical survival. Over time, a deep bond formed between them. It was not the bond of family by blood, but it was a bond forged through trust, care, and shared experience. The rancher had come to see her not just as a visitor or a child in need, but as someone who had brought light into his life. The girl had found not only safety but also a mentor and a friend. She learned the value of patience, the importance of observation, and the quiet strength that comes from being part of a community. Each day, as she moved through her chores and learned new lessons, she felt a growing sense of belonging, a feeling she had never known in the wide, lonely desert. Evenings became a time for quiet reflection. They would sit together on the porch, the sun setting in brilliant oranges and purples, painting the sky with colors that seemed almost magical. The rancher would hum a soft tune, and the girl would listen, her eyes reflecting the last light of the day. She would sometimes ask questions about his life, about the land, and about the people who had come before them. He answered patiently, sharing wisdom in a way that was gentle and encouraging. These moments became a ritual, a comforting rhythm that helped them both feel connected in a world that could so easily feel harsh and isolating. The girl also began to form friendships with the animals on the ranch. The horses grew to trust her, nuzzling her gently and following her with quiet loyalty. The chickens would cluck softly as she passed, and even the family dog seemed to understand that she was now part of the household. These small bonds brought her joy, teaching her that connection could be found in many forms, not only with people but with all living things. She discovered that caring for others, whether human or animal, was a source of strength and happiness, a lesson she would carry with her for the rest of her life. As the months went by, the girl's presence began to change the ranch as well. The once quiet household now had laughter and life. Her curiosity and energy brought light into the daily routines, and the rancher found himself inspired by her resilience. He had learned much from life on the frontier, but her courage and determination reminded him of the power of hope and the importance of opening one's heart, even in a world that could be unforgiving. One day, while walking along a familiar trail, the girl stopped and looked out over the vast plains. She felt the wind on her face and the sun warming her back, and for the first time in a long while, she felt truly at peace. She remembered the days when she had wandered alone, the fear that had gripped her heart and the emptiness of the endless desert. Now she was no longer alone. She had found safety, friendship, and a place where she could grow. She turned to the rancher and smiled, a small but genuine expression of gratitude and trust. He nodded in return, understanding that their journey together had only just begun, but that they had already changed each other's lives forever. Time passed, and the girl continued to grow, both in skill and in confidence. She learned to ride the horses with grace, to manage the livestock with care, and to navigate the land with a keen eye. She became a part of the community, her courage and kindness earning her respect from neighbors and townsfolk alike. She had transformed from a frightened, lonely child into a young person with purpose, strength, and the knowledge that she was valued. The rancher watched her with quiet pride. He had always believed in the importance of helping those in need, but this experience had taught him more than he had expected. He learned that courage could come from the most unexpected places, that trust could grow even in the hardest of circumstances, and that kindness had the power to heal loneliness in ways nothing else could. Their bond, forged through hardship and nurtured by care, became a lasting testament to the resilience of the human spirit and the transformative power of compassion. Years later, when the girl had grown taller and stronger, she often thought back to the day she had first wandered onto the ranch. She remembered the fear, the uncertainty, and the desperate loneliness she had felt. She realized how far she had come, how much she had learned, and how the kindness of one man had changed the course of her life. The rancher, too, reflected on that day with gratitude, knowing that he had been part of something meaningful and rare, a true connection born out of trust, courage, and the simple act of letting someone know they did not have to face the world alone. And so, in the wide, beautiful, and sometimes unforgiving land of the West, the Apache girl found not only safety and shelter but also belonging, friendship, and hope. The rancher, weathered by life but enriched by the experience, had learned that sometimes the smallest acts of kindness could have the greatest impact. Together they proved that even in a harsh world, courage, trust, and compassion could create a home, and that no one truly had to face life alone when hearts were open to one another.